Hello everyone. This video is the discussion prompt for the fifth and final discussion of your School Improvement Council. It is intended for schools participating in the School Improvement Institute who are updating their school improvement plan. During this video, we will provide an overview of the coming year and instructions for how to participate in this month's discussions. My name is Sue Reynolds, and I am president of the American Student Achievement Institute. Okay, so let's begin with that quick review. First semester, your school and your community spent time implementing your current year's school improvement plan. So first semester was all about implementing. In the second semester, you began creating next year's school improvement plan, while at the same time you were implementing this year's plan. The question is, given who we are now and the new student data that we have, what adjustments do we need to make in our old school improvement plan, the one we're currently implementing, so that it becomes the appropriate school improvement plan for next year? So this semester in January, we began by updating your current school improvement plan, and the first thing we did was update your goals. So you looked at your PAIs, your broad goals, and also your very specific SMART goals, and you updated them to be appropriate for next school year. Then, in February, you looked at the root causes. And remember, root causes are very important to school improvement planning. We think they are probably the most important step to make sure that you have a rigorous and high-quality school improvement plan. So those root causes were the reasons that were things that might interfere with your school's ability to reach your SMART goals. So they're things that are getting in the way. And if you're going to reach those SMART goals, you've got to address those root causes successfully. So this month we'll be looking at how are we going to address those root causes that you've identified. What are we going to do about those things that are getting in the way? So we're looking at interventions, or the strategies or the steps that we're going to take to address those root causes. We know that if we can make those root causes go away, that you're very likely to reach your SMART goals. So the design of your interventions this month is critically important. And then after this month, which will be the last discussion with your council, next month your steering team, people in your school, people in your community, will begin preparing for the implementation of those interventions. So they'll create professional development for the people that will be implementing those interventions. They'll be coming up with the resources that they need in order to make those interventions work. They'll be coming up with an implementation calendar. So this month is about determining what those interventions will be, and next month we'll be taking all the steps so that those interventions become implemented fully and with integrity. Okay, so at this point we have three products to your new school improvement plan. You have an updated vision, you have updated goals, and then you have updated root causes. And then again this month we're going to be updating your interventions. So let's look at interventions. And we'll begin with the definition. An intervention is simply, they're things that address the things that you've identified as getting in the way of student achievement. So they are the things that you're going to do to make those root causes go away. We know that if you've identified the right root causes, if you can make them go away, if you can address them, then you're likely to reach your SMART goals, your achievement goals. So let's say a couple things about interventions, and this is really important. Interventions can be general in focus, or they can be specific in focus. A general intervention tends to impact a general root cause. So let's say that your root cause was poor attendance. Well, that's a general root cause. It's going to impact all of your all of your SMART goals. So that's a general root cause, and so typically interventions then are also going to be general. So you might have an intervention to have a new attendance policy. That's very broad. Will it have a big impact if attendance is an issue? Absolutely. But it's broad in that it's going to impact all of your SMART goals and all of your root causes. So that's a broad intervention. We have found, however, over the 20 years that we've been helping schools improve, that if you can really work on specific interventions, that is really what's going to raise student achievement. So for a specific intervention, we want to look at a specific root cause and then say, okay, for this root cause, what are we going to do about that root cause? Not in a general way that's going to impact all of the root causes and all of the SMART goals, but very specifically, what are we going to do about this root cause? So let's say that one of your root causes was aligned with a specific SMART goal, and it was a root cause where you identified, well, no wonder the kids aren't aren't mastering ratios on I-STEP because we don't teach ratios. And so an intervention that would be very specific is, let's implement a series of lessons on ratios. So it's very specific to that specific root cause. It's not something that's broad that's going to impact all SMART goals and all root causes. It's very specific to that SMART goal and that root cause. So maybe you've identified that your kids aren't mastering ratios because they're disengaged in class. So an intervention might be differentiated instruction to make sure that kids are engaged in their learning. So again, very specific to that specific SMART goal and the specific root cause. Another one might be that we're not giving frequent assessments in the classroom, so teachers aren't able to identify which students have mastered ratios and which haven't. And so again, that's a very specific root cause, and now let's put in a very specific intervention that we're going to do frequent classroom assessments. And finally, then maybe another root cause that you identified for this SMART goal is that kids don't get extra help when they haven't mastered ratios. And so another very specific intervention might be to put in a math club or some kind of tutoring program during school or after school. So I think you can see on these specific interventions, we've really targeted a specific root cause and a specific SMART goal. The general interventions are good, and in a general way, they're going to help the school. But if you can really narrow it down and specifically nail a root cause and the associated SMART goal, that's what's going to drive achievement the most. So as we're guiding you and helping you, we're really going to be focusing on those specific interventions this year. Okay, another thing to look at as you're thinking about recommending interventions to your school as a council member is some interventions tend to have more impact than others. We like to classify an intervention one of three ways. We say it's high impact inside, high impact outside, or low impact. Let me explain those. So as you're analyzing and evaluating what the school's thinking about doing next year, if an intervention is high impact inside, that means that we're making a change inside the classroom. We're changing something about what's taught or how it's taught or how we provide extra help for that. That is the biggest bang for the buck. If your school is implementing interventions that are having a high impact inside the classroom, that is going to really help the most in terms of driving achievement up. So examples of that might be aligning, the math curriculum with rigorous standards, having a series of lessons on ratios, differentiated instruction. Those are all interventions that are happening inside the classroom. Then there are also some high impact interventions that are happening outside of the classroom, although they're not as strong generally as the inside the classroom interventions. So, for example, if a school did the math club, they're providing tutoring after school for math. Well, that's extra help for kids. That's one of the big bang for the bucks. areas, and that's great. It's happening outside the classroom. We're providing extra help, so that would be a high impact outside. Now, why isn't that as impactful as a high impact inside? Because after school, outside of the classroom, we don't get all kids. We get kids who are able to stay after school or who are able to do whatever. If it's inside the classroom, we've captured all kids. So high impact inside is the best type of intervention. High impact outside is good. The other thing I'd like you to consider is low impact. And I'll give you my favorite example. We had a school in an urban area where community organizations decided to purchase a book bag for every student. And that was a nice thing to do. The kids loved it, showed that the community, was focused on education, thought education was important, so it was not a bad intervention. However, if this were a 6th grade class and we were teaching 3rd grade content to the 6th grade class, it wouldn't make any difference in the world if they had a new book bag. They would still be learning 3rd grade content in their 6th grade class. That's why those high impact inside the classroom interventions are so important. So another low impact example, community mentoring program. Is that a nice intervention? Absolutely. Is it going to have an impact on students' lives? Absolutely. However, once again, if we've got that wonderful community mentoring program, but we're still teaching 3rd grade content to our 6th graders, it's not going to make any difference. So low impact interventions, a lot of times they become add-ons. So what else can we do? Well, let's give the kids a book bag. Let's have a mentoring program. They're just add-ons instead of really digging into what's happening inside the classroom. The other thing is that they tend often to be feel-good interventions. They make us feel good because we're doing something. We're not really challenging what's happening inside the classroom. We're just adding on. They're feel-good interventions, and they're good, but they don't have as high impact as those high impact inside interventions. So as a council member, as you're looking at interventions, be thinking about, is this going to change what's happening inside the classroom? That's really where you want to be spending your energy. Okay, another thing we'd like you to consider as a council member when you're advising and determining what interventions your school will be using is how much energy are those interventions going to take. Sometimes when schools get to this point, they're so excited and there's so many root causes that they just want to tackle right away because they care about the kids and they love teaching. And so what they tend to do is to tackle a gazillion high energy interventions. There's not enough energy to go around and everything falls apart. So we want schools to be very careful that rather than doing a lot of things in a mediocre way, it'll be much better for you if you do a few things in a very intense way. So we don't want you to have too many high energy interventions. On the other end, we get some schools that, for whatever reason, want to spend very little energy on school improvement. And in those schools, we end up with a lot of low energy interventions. And that's, of course, not good either. So there's one other kind of intervention that I wanted to mention, and that's a low energy continuation. That is an intervention that used to be a high energy intervention. It took a lot of professional development, it took a lot of resource securement, it took a lot of trial and error and coaching and mentoring teachers as they tried it. It was a high energy intervention. But we've been doing it so many years that it's now not taking as much time and energy. So we call those a low energy continuation. Those are great interventions. They used to be high interventions. We've been doing high energy interventions, doing it a long time. Now it's taking much less energy. So we really want you to pay attention to, how much are we stretching the staff? We want to stretch the staff. We want to do that because we care about kids. But on the other hand, if we stretch the staff so much that they can't do things in a sound manner, then we have problems. So think about the energy level as you're recommending interventions. Okay. So what you'll be discussing as a council this month is, what do you want your school and your community to do next year to address your root causes? What are you going to do about these root causes? So I know you already know how to get to this page because this is where the video was that you're watching. But notice in the top right-hand part of the page that the first thing we'd like you to do is to review your school's root causes. We want all of your interventions to be aligned with a root cause. So let's make sure that you know what your school's root causes are. So you'll start by reviewing that. Then, as you start to answer the discussion questions, the first thing that the system will ask you to do is it'll say, let's look at the current interventions. And if each of the council members would make a recommendation. Do we continue this intervention next year? Do we omit it? So you may be thinking, okay, what is this intervention all about? Why are we doing it? What root causes is it associated with? If you click on the title of the intervention, 7th grade ratios unit in this case, that will open up a screen that describes the intervention, tells you why the school is doing it, what root causes it was designed to impact, so you can get a sense of the intervention that way before you recommend whether you should keep it next year or omit it next year. Then, if you decide to keep an intervention, but you think you need to tweak it or expand it or whatever, we give you a box there to just make some recommendations. So you may say, math club is great, but instead of just being offered once a week, it needs to be offered every day. So you can make recommendations there about how to tweak the interventions as you go into the next school year. Then, in part 2 of the discussion, we ask, are there any additional interventions that you think the school should implement? And to help you explore possibilities, we've given you 5 links there that will open up different databases to help you think about additional interventions. So the first link there, student suggestions. Your steering team has already asked your student body about what they think the school and community should do about the root causes next year. And so the summary of those discussions is in our system so that you can go in and see what the kids in your building said about how they think the school should be addressing the root causes. Kids come up with great ideas. They often are much more creative and thoughtful than the experts that you would pay to come into your school. If you ask the kids, they typically will be able to give you really good ideas on what to do. Okay, then the second link there, the SI2 school-based interventions. There are over 12,000 interventions that our SI2 schools have implemented into our system over the year. So you can go into that system and say, search for the word ratios and see if any other schools are doing interventions on ratios, or search for the word attendance and see if other schools are doing interventions on attendance. Really great way to get good ideas from other schools about what they are doing about some of the same root causes that they have that you have. So that's one resource. The third bullet there is another database of interventions, but these are all community-based interventions. They've been implemented by mayor's offices, chambers of commerce, community foundations, economic development groups, public libraries, Boy Scout troops. So again, you could go into there and search for the word attendance and see if there are community groups that are doing interventions around some of the same root causes that you have. Then the next one, the fourth one, that is a database of all of the sessions at our conference over the years. And the descriptions are there, so you can go into there and search for the word attendance and see what sessions we've had at conference around attendance and who presented those sessions, and get some ideas that way as well. And then finally, just a link to Google, so you could go online and search for attendance strategies in schools and see what comes up and get ideas that way. So you don't have to recommend additional interventions, but if you would like to, here's where you would do that. So you're going to write a description of the intervention, and if you would please, the root causes that intervention would impact. So that's what needs to go into the description box, the description and the root causes that intervention would impact. Okay, and then finally, we give you a box at the bottom to write anything that you'd like to add to the discussion. So just click put your comments in there and then click save. Okay, so after today, here's what's going to happen. After this discussion is complete, the steering team is going to consider the advisory council input, all of the discussion, and then they are going to create a preliminary list of interventions for your school to implement next year. And then the steering team is going to check a bunch of things. First of all, they're going to check a lot of tools that are in our system that are crosswalks. And those crosswalks are going to help your steering team assess the strength of the interventions and determine if all of the external expectations have been met. So if your school is in Indiana, for example, there's a Public Law 221 that expects your school to implement certain interventions. If you're a Title I school, receive federal dollars for Title I. If you are a lower achieving school in Indiana, there are certain interventions that that state agencies or the General Assembly has for your school. And so these crosswalks will help your school to determine if you've met all those external expectations based on the things that you had planned to do. And if not, then they'll need to tweak some of those interventions so that you meet all the requirements for your school. Then, after they've done the crosswalks and everything's fine and you're just really happy with your interventions and everything's a go for next year, and the final thing we're going to do is that the schools are going to contact their DOE, Department of Education, outreach coordinator in Indiana, and ask for their input regarding the interventions. Our Indiana Department of Education has a great outreach staff that is also providing guidance for schools. And we want to give them a chance to say, ooh, this part's a little weak, or this part, you've missed this external requirement or whatever, before you end up submitting your school improvement plan, or if you're a focus or priority school, your student achievement plan to the Department of Ed. So that just gives us a bit of a chance to coordinate with the department in your work as you're doing the work. Now, what that means to you as a council member is that the interventions that you came up with in your preliminary list, your steering team may need to tweak those a little bit to make sure that they're meeting everybody's expectations of your school. So the expectations of the federal DOE, US DOE, or the expectations of the Indiana Department of Education. Okay, then after all of that is done, the steering team will send a list of interventions to the advisory council and they'll ask you for consensus. Once you've reached consensus, and the last step is that the steering team will send an intervention list to all the educators in their school, and they'll ask each of those people to indicate, one, that they're aware of the interventions, and two, that they support the interventions in concept. So that's the final step. That is actually an SI2 step. We just want to make sure, and your steering team wants to make sure, that all of your educators on board. If they're not, we want to find that out now rather than when we're in the middle of implementation. So this just kind of asks everybody to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down in terms of, can we live with these interventions? Okay, so that's it for this month, and this discussion is incredibly important. We want to make sure that you have high leverage interventions to impact your carefully selected root causes that are aligned with your SMART goals. And if those three things line up, that's when we see student achievement go up at a considerable amount. So, okay, thanks everybody for your input, and as always, we look forward to meeting with you next month, and or meeting with your steering team next month. This is the final discussion for this year with the council, and again, on behalf of your school, thank you for donating your time to these discussions.